Street Fighter, Guilty Gear,
British,
Mortal Kombat. What's the most iconic thing about said franchises? How they look physically, the music maybe?
How can I remember those moments, sweetheart?
All good answers. If you ask me, personally, it's the moves. Moves definitely make the character, and the most iconic ones definitely get remembered. Hadouken, Gunflame,
Get over here!
all iconic moves that have been used for decades. But what's the reason why these moves are even created as such? Well, it's easy. It's to give personality to these characters so that you play them. But what if I told you can go deeper? Is there anything else that developers can do in order to make their characters more interesting? Well, I got the answer. But what is a gimmick? Well, the fighting game glossary explains this in a weird way. It says, a plan of attack that requires either the element of surprise or a lack of knowledge from your opponent to work. The problem with this sort of thing is that gimmicks don't have to necessarily be sort of a knowledge check in order to work. It's something that revolves around the character. So I'll put my own definition out there and maybe it'll clear it up a little more. A gimmick is something all-encompassing the character revolves around. This is very different compared to archetypes, mechanics, and projectiles. An archetype is just your plan of attack for the opponent. So there's Rushdown, there's grapplers, and then there's zoners. Mechanics are usually universal things that everyone has, such as like shield and supers and all that. And projectiles are just traveling attacks. Gimmicks are way different from all of these because they are always character specific, and a good gimmick usually not only helps your archetype, but it also gives the character that has one added flavor. Unfortunately, I don't really think most fighting games actually either do these things sort of well or even include them at all. Except two. So let me introduce you the whole reason why you even came to this video in the first place. BlazBlue Central Fiction and Rivals of Aether. These two franchises give gimmicks a good name. They help the archetype that the character is a part of, and they add flavor to the character. But this can't be proven without a few examples, so let's give a few. Now, I've brought these characters up, but I'm pretty sure there's a few questions in the crowd. The biggest question, how could these characters be anywhere comparable? The second, how are their gimmicks any good? Good question, I'll explain it. See, even though one is a very sexy Chinese lady and one is a aquatic beast, they have one thing that is very comparable to each other, and that's their resources. See, both characters' resources do everything. They're the attack, the defense, the movement, how you recover, it's everything. Without these resources, you can't really do any sort of plays. When it comes to Lichi, it's her staff. When it comes to Orcane, it's his water. But let's start with Lichi first. First off, Lichi is a stance character, so she can throw the staff or she can have the staff with her, changing the result of how she does things. But the staff determines everything that she can do to people. You want to get rid of the staff and throw it afar? You have very good zoning options and good mobility to boot. Keeping it near you will give you a lot of neutral game options that you can use against the opponent, along with good set play. With all these tools that the staff provides, it gives a lot of things that Lichi can do to people, meaning that you can really choose how you want to play the game. It also gives her a lot of flavor, specifically towards her Chinese heritage. The weapon alone being a sort of reference to Sun Wukong's staff, Journey to the West. The yin-yang sort of shape that happens when she performs with the staff, the petals. It clearly harpers on tradition. And that's pretty fair, honestly. A gimmick where you can adapt to any sort of situation that you can, and it ties into their heritage. But I guess the next question is, how does the porpoise relate? See, Orcane shares this mechanical design with his water. Orcane can simply press B and a little puddle of water goes in front of him. This water, just like Lichi's staff, has a lot of properties that you can use with it. Pressing down B will create bubbles that your opponent has to deal with as projectiles, which gives you time in order to create space for yourself when it comes to the character. A second option you can do is extend your range. See, normally Orcane's range when it comes to his smash attacks are not really that big, especially compared to other people in the cast. But expending one water actually extends the range of what would usually be a very stubby character, which allows you to get some cheeky kills if need be. The last important thing that I can talk about is definitely recovering back on stage. Putting water near on stage just for you to up B in order to teleport to it is very good. Not only that, it has a hitbox, a very strong hitbox, so if you're able to bait people into it, it's even better. This makes Orcane a very adaptable character, with players, especially at the top level, flip-flopping between what sort of archetypes that he's actually able to perform against the opponent. The gimmick also ties into what Orcane is. He's an elemental and weaves his body as well as the liquid itself, changing the state of matter as he sees fit, whether it comes to bubbles, whether it comes to a hydro pump-esque attack, whether it comes to like slipping and sliding and moving everywhere. It's amazing. Both of these characters really show how resource managing as a gimmick can work so very well. If optimized correctly, you can really be able to switch between offense, defense, movement, whatever it need be, as long as you know the weaknesses and the strengths of what your gimmick has. It gives pizzazz to what you usually play in fighting games. You get a projectile, you get maybe a long poking move, and then that's really it. But the fact that these gimmicks build on top of one another in order to actually perform different things makes it more special than I realized. And it really makes me wish that other fighting games could incorporate something like this. But there's more stuff to talk about, so let's get on with the next one. So we see how resource managing when it comes to a gimmick can really bring out every single archetype when it comes to a character. But what happens when you have to funnel that gimmick into one archetype instead? Say a Rushdown, for example. Well, let's look at two characters that have the art of getting in conquered. Susanoo and Zetterburn. Both characters are known for their Rushdown style of fighting. But they also have an added caveat to them, and that's snowballing. See, unlike a lot of other fighting games, Joker, having a snowball mechanic usually just means that you're just better than someone. Whether it comes to having more damage or whether it comes to having more movement speed, that is usually how snowball rushdown characters with these sort of mechanics work. What I like about Susanoo and Zetterburn is that they're not like this at all. Let's take a look at Susanoo first. Susanoo in BlazBlue is one of the most feared and powerful characters in the game. I would think there would only be about 2 characters that would actually be able to face him, and he honestly complements that in his gameplay. See, his gimmick is called Takagami, or God of Military Arts. Basically, at the start of the round, he doesn't have a lot of specials that he can use against someone, and it's only as the fight keeps going on that he unlocks more and more of it to use against the opponent. This also means that when it comes to attrition, Susanoo has a really good leg up, especially when it's really late in the game. Because as time goes on, he's going to have a lot more special moves to open the player up in order to destroy them. Does that mean that there's going to be more damage? Of course, but the thing is the way that damage is held. The reason why I do more damage is because I can open up the person more, not simply because my jab is now twice to 3 times as powerful, you know? It also goes with the lore of the character, honestly. He was sealed for a long time, almost thousands of years, and it's only when 2 warriors fused in with each other in order to make him again. So that dormant power that was in himself is slowly coming out. His gimmick is honestly a perfect translation of his lore, and it's like, I can't believe that this character exists. But what about Zetterburn? How does he snowball the opponent? Zetterburn's gimmick is fire. I know, really obvious. But it's the way fire is applied and how you can use it that really differentiates the use between other platform fighter characters. See, if you're in fire or hit with certain moves that are applied with fire to you, you slowly get more and more percentage. Although it looks very low now, it's only when you increase it with like aerials that hit you that you understand that it's a lot more serious than you think. Getting hit with 1 interaction for the combo to do 30 only to realize that your percentage is going up to 44 because of the slow increase in damage is pretty scary. Especially when you use certain tactics to maybe use your side B as a regular projectile, or simply use down B in order to disincentivize people in order to move in front of you. Because remember, if you move in front of the flame, you'll get damage, and if you're hit by any sort of aerial, especially if the aerial or combo goes on for a long time, that damage is going to rack up. But the biggest thing that you could ever think about when it comes to Zetterburn's mechanic is also the fact of what happens when he smash attacks you. See, hitting someone in the fire with a smash attack actually increases the knockback in which you are inflicted when you get hit. Add on to the snowball-like effect that this Rushdown character has, and he can be very scary. Think about it, if he's so good at racking up damage over time, this means that one simple bait or one single prediction, especially at like 60 to 70%, could kill you. Unlike Susanoo's mechanic, you don't get a lot of things in order to open people up. But for what Zetterburn does, he doesn't need more tools, he just needs to incentivize one. Putting fire on everywhere, getting one sort of interaction when it comes to a combo, it means practically that every single situation after like, 30% could probably end in death if you're not careful. This makes fighting a Zetterburn more of a battle of attrition than anything else, knowing when you need to evade and when you need to go in, because one simple smash attack at a certain percent can kill you. I love both characters and how they are actually able to take the Rushdown mechanic, add a snowball effect, and make it so that it's not derivative on itself, like a few other characters. A lot of other characters usually just give more damage, give more movement speed on other sort of things, make it so that you paralyze the opponent, and that's not really as creative as these sorts of things. But we're getting a little ahead of ourselves. Let's look at another thing that both series do very well. The Gimmick of Lockdown, performed by Arakune and Sylvanos. Both characters' gimmicks allows them to have a sort of lockdown strategy, forcing the player to be very defensive or getting rid of their options slowly until they can finally get one lasting hit. To show an example, let's go over Arakune first. Arakune's gimmick is Curse. He has to build a bar in order to activate this sort of thing, but once it does, it completely throws the other opponent into a travistic, horror-filled mess. Once this bar is filled, every single normal that Arakune has will spawn a sort of bug-like creature to hit the opponent. These bug-like creatures are very hard to hit away, and essentially means that not only do you have to deal with Arakune's already weird-ass normals as is, but you also have to deal with consecutive bugs hitting you in probably different areas. So essentially when you're fighting Arakune, a lot of the defensive options that you would normally have against a lot of people are thrown out the door. Because you can block correctly for most of his normals, only to get punished by an overhead bug that is just gonna hit you regardless. Your only outs being the fact that if you hit Arakune first, the bugs won't spawn, or you can simply wait it out because its gauge doesn't last for that long. This makes Arakune a lockdown demon. You don't have a lot of ways in order to actually get in, or a lot of the things that you do in order to protect yourself are slowly getting whittled away. It's amazing. Not only that, but the freaky way that these curses look kind of reinstates his lore as well, considering the fact that he's a patient gone wrong and now he's filled with black energy and is looks and feels like a monster. Is he annoying? Yes. But is his gimmick peak? Also yes. But let's look at another person that does lockdown very well. Instead of a sort of monster, let's look at a beast, Sylvanos. When I talk about Sylvanos' gimmick, it always feels weird to say that he can use these to lock these down, especially since a lot of the time that he uses them, it's to really put aggression into opponents. But don't let that fool you. This thing can lock down like crazy. Sylvanos' whole gimmick is grass, and he's able to put sort of little flowers across the stage so that he can extend grass everywhere across. He can hit jab jab special in order to extend the grass off to somewhere else. He can side B into it in order to actually cancel the move into grass or anything he hits. And also, he gains a lot of benefits by up being into grass by having a lot of recovery frames. The big thing though is definitely down B. See, once you extend this grass everywhere, if you do down B, all the grass that is put over there spikes up and hits opponents. If you can spread this grass everywhere and simply wait, you can get a very good area effect and just hit so many angles. Now this is all good information, but the next question you would probably say is, well, how does he lock down with this? Well, let me just show you a little bit. With the combination of certain specials and the range of down B, a lot of what Sylvanos can do is essentially make players not have a lot of ways to get away. Basically, he covers every single option, or at least high tier Sylvanos players would cover every single option that you are going to do so that they can finally get the kill on you. With the added space that they can get from grass or even super jumping with their flowers, they're able to close the gap in on people and just keep people in the blender for as long as possible. So with Arakune, he's making so that you can do less and less options against you. Sylvanos, on the other hand, is covering and trapping every single option you have and really dictating you to one thing until you get just smash attacked into oblivion. Because of this, both characters have a lot of disdain in how they play, because essentially when you try to face against someone like this, you don't really feel like you're playing the game. But I think it's perfect, especially since both of these characters have very inept weaknesses that you could use against them if you really wanted to. Although very annoying characters, I would rather them being annoying because their gimmick makes them annoying, rather than one or two buttons that are just completely inept. So, we have a final set of characters that I'd really want to talk about when it comes to gimmicks in fighting games. Which is very weird, because they essentially deal with the reverse of gimmicks. This is Hakumen and Clairen. Both characters deal with being the anti-gimmick character. Basically, every single gimmick that someone else has, they are trying to take them away, which is very bizarre if I'm being honest with you. But let's start with Hakumen first. Hakumen's whole base as a character is to be a counter against everyone. Whether it's a projectile, whether it's a normal, whether it's a super, he'll either have a parry or a way in order to get rid of it. And once he does a few of these parries or a few of these moves, he actually gains other stuff that he can use against the opponent. Things called magatamas that he can use to either cancel his normals or use as supers. For his normals, he can attack projectiles and turn them into his own projectiles to use against the opponent. Meaning that throwing things out there and praying for a miracle probably isn't going to do well against this character. As I said before, a lot of his specials, including some of his drive forms, when he activates them, any sort of normal or any sort of good attack on it will simply get parried. Either a downwards grab or simply just slicing through them in a line, dealing a lot of damage. Combined with his slow movement and with the mechanics he already has, this makes Hakumen the best parry character in existence, invalidating other people's gimmicks only to oppress them with his own strong normals and strong parries as a result. Fighting him willy-nilly and just throwing out moves probably isn't going to work. Clairen, though, does this a little differently. See, Clairen has some of the fundamentals of Hakumen when it comes to like deleting sort of projectiles, but goes fully into this effect. Although she doesn't have the best things in order to actually counter like opponents' regular A moves, she does have a lot of ways in order to invalidate people's gimmicks, just make them completely worthless against her. Although she doesn't have the same sort of gimmick as Hakumen when it comes to attacking something and making it its own projectile, simply using her sword deletes projectiles anyway, so that's pretty good. And true, she doesn't have the same sort of parrying that Hakumen does, but what she does is still a little interesting. Her down beam makes a completely big force field, if you will, that completely gets rid of every single projectile that goes in or out. This has a lot more range than Hakumen's simple normals, which makes it so that she doesn't have to deal with projectiles as much as Hakumen needs to. It also cripples a lot of players because a lot of their mechanics, whether it comes from any sort of type of element or a machinery, mind you, it just doesn't work. So rather than baiting and waiting like Hakumen does, you're essentially now making it so that both players have to box. Both players in the zone are essentially stripped down of all the special mechanics that they have and simply just have to box it out. Incentivizing people in order to go with their fundamentals in order to fight people, which is what Clairen does very well. With the long range of her jabs and also her aerials, alongside with the fact that her secondary gimmick of Tipper just extends combos and just kills people like really early, it makes her truly stand out, even though she's pretty simple. Ultimately, it makes these characters the quintessential anti-gimmick characters of their respective series. One wants to strip you down in order to get one good parry to end the match, and one wants to strip you down so that we can fight fair. Truly very interesting characters. I truly wish that fighting games gave gimmicks more of a chance. Sometimes I see very different interpretations of moves, sometimes I see a lot of, regular mechanics that are added for defense and offense in the game, and that's cool, really cool. But when it really comes down to it, I want to play a specific character, and if that specific character can have a lot more added depth to it by adding a gimmick, I think it only would just improve them. Sure, we've had a few times where gimmicks have gone awry, Smash Ultimate. But I truly do think that gimmicks, when added correctly, can make the game feel better than it already does. Because it's not just a mechanic that everyone can do, it's something that my character can do, and it's very special in that way. Rather than simple damage, rather than simple like movement options, rather than like having more combos, it's something personal. I truly hope more and more fighting games incorporate this aspect to characters, because they're just so interesting.